Picture this. You're scrolling through social media, and you see someone posting something that makes your blood boil. Maybe it's a political opinion that goes against everything you believe. Or perhaps it's someone confidently stating facts that you know are completely wrong. Your fingers start moving before your brain can stop them. You craft the perfect response, loaded with evidence, logic, and just the right amount of intellectual superiority. You hit send, feeling satisfied that you've just delivered the intellectual equivalent of a knockout punch. But then something strange happens. Instead of admitting defeat, they double down. They twist your words, ignore your evidence, and somehow manage to make you look like the unreasonable one. Hours later, you're still thinking about it, still frustrated, still convinced that if you could just find the right words, the perfect argument, you could finally make them see the truth. Here's what nobody tells you about this scenario. The smartest person in that entire exchange was the one who saw your comment and kept scrolling. While you were busy trying to win an argument, they understood something that most people never figure out. They understood that intelligence isn't about proving you're right. It's about knowing when not to prove you're right. And that realization changes everything. We live in a world that worships debate. Turn on any news channel and you'll see people screaming at each other, each convinced they're the voice of reason. Open any comment section and you'll find digital battlefields where keyboard warriors fight to the death over topics they'll forget about next week. We've been conditioned to believe that intelligent people are the ones who can out-argue anyone, who can demolish opposing viewpoints with facts and logic, who never back down from an intellectual challenge. But what if I told you that this entire framework is not just wrong, but actively harmful to your intelligence? The truth is that truly intelligent people have discovered something counterintuitive. The smartest move in most arguments is not to make a move at all. They've learned that winning an argument often means losing something far more valuable. And once you understand what that something is, you'll never look at arguments the same way again. Think about the most intelligent people you know personally. I don't mean the ones who are loudest in meetings or who always have to have the last word in every discussion. I mean the ones who seem to possess a quiet confidence, who listen more than they speak, who somehow always seem to know more than they let on. Have you ever noticed that these people rarely get into heated arguments? When everyone else is getting worked up about some controversial topic, they tend to stay calm, maybe ask a few thoughtful questions, but they don't seem to feel the need to prove their intellectual superiority. At first glance, you might think they're just being polite or avoiding conflict, but there's something much deeper going on here. These individuals have figured out what psychologists and philosophers have been trying to tell us for decades. Most arguments aren't actually about finding truth or solving problems. They're about something much more primitive and much more dangerous to genuine intelligence. They're about ego, status, and the desperate human need to feel superior to others. And intelligent people recognize this trap for what it is. When you engage in an argument, especially a heated one, something happens to your brain that most people don't realize. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking and objective analysis, starts to shut down. Meanwhile, your limbic system, the emotional center of your brain, takes over. You stop thinking clearly and start thinking defensively. Your goal shifts from understanding truth to defending your position at all costs. You cherry-pick evidence that supports your view while ignoring anything that challenges it. You stop listening to your opponent and start planning your next counterattack. In other words, you become less intelligent, not more. But here's where it gets really interesting. While you're busy becoming less intelligent, something else is happening that you're probably not aware of. You're revealing information about yourself that intelligent people can read like a book. Every time you feel compelled to argue, every time you can't let a comment slide, every time you absolutely have to prove someone wrong, you're broadcasting something about your psychological state that perceptive people can see clearly. You're showing that your sense of self is tied to being right. You're demonstrating that you need external validation for your ideas. You're revealing that you can be emotionally manipulated simply by someone disagreeing with you. Most importantly, you're proving that you don't have true confidence in your own intelligence, because truly confident people don't feel the need to constantly prove it to others. This is why intelligent people avoid arguments. It's not because they don't have opinions or because they're afraid of conflict. It's because they understand that engaging in most arguments is a losing proposition. regardless of who technically wins. Even if you successfully prove your point, you've lost something more valuable: your time, your emotional energy, and often your reputation. Because here's something most people don't realize about arguments. Observers usually don't judge the winner based on who had the better facts or logic. They judge based on who stayed calmer, who seemed more reasonable, who appeared to be above the fray. Think about it this way. Imagine you're watching two people argue about politics at a dinner party. One person is getting red in the face, raising their voice, frantically pulling up articles on their phone to prove their points. The other person is listening calmly, asking thoughtful questions, and speaking in measured tones. Even if the first person has better facts, who appears more intelligent to you, who would you rather have a serious conversation with later? Who seems like they have their life together? This dynamic becomes even more pronounced in our digital age. Social media has turned every opinion into a potential battlefield, and the people who consistently get drawn into these battles start to develop a reputation. They become known as the person who always has to argue, who can't let anything slide, who turns every casual conversation into a debate. Meanwhile, the people who engage selectively and thoughtfully start to build a different kind of reputation. They become known as wise, measured, someone whose opinion actually matters when they choose to share it. But avoiding arguments isn't just about reputation management or appearing more intelligent to others. There's something much more profound happening when you choose not to engage. You're exercising a form of mental discipline that actually makes you more intelligent over time. Every time you see something that triggers your urge to argue and you choose not to respond, you're strengthening your ability to think rather than react. You're training yourself to pause, consider multiple perspectives, and respond thoughtfully rather than emotionally. This discipline creates space for what intelligent people do instead of arguing. They think, while everyone else is busy battling. Over surface-level disagreements, intelligent people are digging deeper. They're asking themselves questions like, why does this person believe what they believe? What experiences might have shaped their worldview? What am I not understanding about their perspective? Is there any validity to their point that I haven't considered? What would change my mind about this topic? These questions lead to genuine learning and intellectual growth, something that never happens when you're in argument mode. When you're arguing, your goal is to defend your existing beliefs, not to examine or improve them. But when you're thinking, your goal is understanding, and understanding always makes you smarter. There's another layer to this that goes even deeper. Intelligent people have often discovered that their own beliefs and opinions are far more fragile and uncertain than they initially realized. The more you actually study any complex topic, the more you realize how much you don't know. The more you understand about how human psychology works, the more you recognize your own biases and blind spots. This creates a kind of intellectual humility that makes arguing seem almost absurd. When you truly understand how little any of us really know about most topics, when you recognize how much our opinions are shaped by our experiences, our emotions, our social circles, and our psychological needs, rather than by pure rational analysis, it becomes much harder to feel certain enough about anything to want to fight about it. This doesn't mean intelligent people don't have convictions or beliefs. It means they hold those beliefs with the appropriate level of uncertainty and remain open to new information. This openness is actually a superpower in disguise. While argumentative people are stuck defending positions they committed to in the heat of the moment, intelligent people are free to change their minds when presented with better information. They can admit when they're wrong without it threatening their identity. They can say, "I don't know," without feeling diminished. And paradoxically, this makes them much more persuasive when they do choose to share their thoughts. There's a social psychology principle at work here that most people don't understand. When someone is constantly arguing and trying to prove they're right, others start to tune them out. But when someone rarely argues and speaks thoughtfully, when they do engage, people actually listen more carefully. Their words carry more weight precisely because they use them more sparingly. This connects to something that successful leaders, negotiators, and communicators have always understood. The most powerful position in any conversation is often the one where you're asking questions rather than making statements. When you argue, you're trying to force someone to accept your perspective. But when you ask thoughtful questions, you're inviting them to examine their own perspective. And people are much more likely to change their minds about something they've convinced themselves of than something you've tried to convince them of. But perhaps the most important reason intelligent people avoid arguments is that they've learned to distinguish between arguments and genuine discussions. A genuine discussion is collaborative. Both parties are working together to understand a topic better or solve a problem. There's mutual respect, careful listening, and a willingness to be influenced by good points from the other side. Arguments, on the other hand, are competitive. Each party is trying to win rather than to learn or understand. The difference isn't always obvious at first, but intelligent people have developed a sense for it. They can usually tell within the first few exchanges whether someone is genuinely interested in exploring a topic together or whether they're just looking for a fight. And when they sense it's the latter, they disengage. Not because they're afraid of conflict, but because they recognize that nothing productive will come from it. This ability to distinguish between productive and unproductive conversations is itself a form of intelligence. It requires emotional intelligence to read the other person's motivations and intentions. It requires social intelligence to understand the dynamics at play, and it requires strategic intelligence to know when engagement will serve your goals and when it won't. There's also a temporal aspect to this that's worth considering. Intelligent people tend to think in longer time horizons than most. While someone might feel victorious after winning an argument, intelligent people are thinking about the long-term consequences. Will this argument damage an important relationship? Will it create an enemy where there could have been an ally? Will it associate me with being difficult or argumentative? Will it waste time and energy I could have used for more productive activities? When you start thinking about arguments from this perspective, most of them start to seem like bad investments. The immediate satisfaction of proving someone wrong rarely outweighs the long-term costs. And intelligent people have learned to optimize for long-term outcomes rather than short-term emotional gratification. This doesn't mean intelligent people are passive or that they never stand up for their beliefs. When something truly matters, when the stakes are high, when there's a genuine opportunity to create positive change or prevent harm, they absolutely will engage, but they choose their battles carefully. They pick fights they can win about things that matter with people who might actually be influenced. They don't waste their ammunition on every minor disagreement or casual social media debate. There's a strategic element to this that connects to something military strategists have always understood. The most important battles are often the ones you choose not to fight. Every engagement has costs, even when you win. And sometimes the smartest move is to preserve your resources for battles that truly matter. But beyond strategy and social dynamics, there's something even more fundamental at play here. Intelligent people have often discovered that their need to be right all the time was actually holding them back from becoming wiser. When you're constantly trying to prove how smart you are, you stop focusing on actually becoming smarter. When you're always defending your current beliefs, you stop exploring new ideas that might improve those beliefs. The paradox is that by giving up the need to win arguments, intelligent people often become more influential and persuasive. By admitting uncertainty when appropriate, they become more trustworthy. By listening more than they speak, they learn more than those who are always talking. By choosing their words carefully, those words carry more impact when they do speak. This creates a positive feedback loop. As people become known for being thoughtful rather than argumentative, others start seeking out their opinions. As they become better listeners, people start sharing more valuable information with them. As they become more comfortable with uncertainty, they become better at asking the kinds of questions that lead to genuine insights. Meanwhile, people who are always arguing often find themselves stuck in an increasingly small echo chamber. They attract other argumentative people while driving away those who prefer more thoughtful discourse. They become known for being difficult rather than for being insightful. And they miss out on opportunities to learn from people who might have valuable perspectives, but who don't want to deal with the hassle of a debate. The most successful people in almost every field have learned this lesson. They've figured out. That influence comes not from proving you're the smartest person in the room, but from helping others feel heard and understood. They've discovered that respect is earned not by winning arguments, but by demonstrating wisdom, integrity, and emotional intelligence over time. This is why, if you watch truly intelligent people in action, You'll notice they ask more questions than they make statements. They listen more than they speak. They acknowledge good points from others even when they disagree overall. They focus on understanding rather than being understood. And when they do take strong positions, they do so thoughtfully and strategically, rather than reactively and emotionally. The beautiful irony in all of this is that by learning when not to prove how smart you are, you actually become smarter. By giving up the need to win every argument, you become more influential. By embracing intellectual humility, you gain intellectual authority. And by choosing silence over proving your point, you often make your point more powerfully than any argument ever could. So the next time you feel that familiar urge to correct someone, to prove them wrong, to show everyone how much smarter you are than the person posting obvious nonsense on the internet, remember this: the smartest people in the room are often the ones who choose not to prove it. They understand that true intelligence isn't about winning arguments, it's about winning at life. And those are two very different games with very different rules. The choice is yours. You can keep playing the argument game, winning battles while losing the war for genuine influence and respect. Or you can join the ranks of those who have discovered that the most powerful response to ignorance isn't correction, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have nothing to prove to anyone except yourself.